It's a one-way journey. You only remove wood to expose your piece within it below. It becomes quite a difficult mental challenge to try and picture the way the curves are moving through the space and through the wood. So which bits of wood you need to remove to allow the curve to flow naturally and gracefully with the grain, but eventually coming round and reforming itself. My name is John Samworth. I'm an accountant at a local wood merchants in Falmouth, Cornwall. I also teach an evening class of wood carving at a local tech college, and I also teach some whittling to local scouts troops. Wood carving is one of the slowest processes I've ever come across. Even gardening's fast by comparison. Wood carving is a very slow, gentle process that allows you time to enjoy what you're actually doing.
The expression cutting across the grain comes from that, in the sense that life is easier when you go in taking the easy route and you're cutting with the grain. But if I cut with the grain like this, the knife digs in and it wants to split the wood all the way up. Rather than coming up and cutting out, it wants to split the wood, and I'm going to lose my leading edge. But when I go across the grain, it doesn't try and split, so I keep this edge intact. People who make language don't know how to wood carve.
And every student's asked me the same question about a starter kit. You're much better off practicing with somebody else's to start with, working out which ones suit your needs, then buying those, and when you move on to another project you will need one or two other different gouges to add to the kit, and you build up your kit that way based on the projects that you're doing.
This chisel, which I would call a fluter, is my number one starting tool. I go for this one on most projects. It has a very tight, on an English pattern, number 9 sweep, but the sides are slightly flatter, which means that when I'm carving, if I turn it on its side, it gives me a slightly different cut. So I can do 2 different cuts with the one tool very, very quickly. And I use this one for removing lots and lots of wood, getting rid of the waste wood. The second one is a flattish gouge, and that's used after the fluter for just smoothing off and doing the final shaping. Depending on the scale you're working at, I find a smaller version of Aina or a larger version just as useful, just depends on the scale. And the fifth one I'd put in any starter kit is a skew. This one allows you to get the gouge down and into the corners, and it cuts in both directions. Pencil, must have a pencil, and some sharpening kit, but a regular strop on a piece of leather, and that's just a case of pulling it along just to keep that sharp edge. And that is the basic start of any kit.
I've always enjoyed traditional skills, watching things being done, crafts at work. It started with that friend of mine, David, who came to the office looking for some lime wood for his class. He's an ex-maths teacher. He was buying some lime wood, but he also had with him examples of things that he'd been working with, which I found absolutely fascinating. And I went along a couple of nights later to his first class, and I've been going ever since. Sadly, he's not very well now, and I'm now running his class for him. But at least it's an opportunity to pass on some skills. What little bit I've learned from him, pass it on to some others who may never have ever picked up a hand tool.
This is a work in progress starting piece for teaching most of the students. It's 3 oak leaves and 2 acorns and 3 acorn cups. It's a natural piece, so the idea of this one is that you're actually drawing a realistic life form rather than a stylized form. The starting point is using either a V-gouge or the veiner and just tracing out the shape you've got. So having traced around, you then use the flute and working away from the piece that we want to keep. My left hand is a brake hand steadying the work. My right hand is pushing, but it's not pushing that much. Most of the push is actually coming from a slight leaning forward in my body weight. That enables my arms and my shoulders to work longer with less effort. And I'm using a slight twist. The flatter gouge then comes in and is used to then take off the tops and smooth off the top. You can just hear that lovely crisp sound as they cut through the wood. Part 1 is to remove this down to the set depth.
What do I feel when I'm wood carving? There is an element of excitement whenever I pick up the tool and start to feel it cut through the wood, and there is a definite sound that wood makes when it's being cut sweetly and you've got a good cut that goes through it. It makes a very distinctive sound, and that is quite a pleasure to hear. It's a mental activity that I'm focusing on trying to solve a particular problem. I'm able to cut out all the other stresses of life and just focus on the piece I'm working on. Really don't think about anything at all. That's perhaps the beauty and appeal to me, is it's just a way of actually closing off and just relaxing, almost meditating, I suppose. People ask me, how do you have the patience to do that? I wouldn't have the patience to do that. And you don't need patience to do it. It's something I enjoy, and it always surprises me at how quickly the time just disappears.
The next stage is then to start to square off and straighten off these edges by using a straighter tool. The wood is very thin on this side. You use a flute to whisk off most of the waste wood quite quickly. Once you've gone all the way round, the best thing is to decide what sort of level you're trying to aim for, take it down to the level you want, and then try and cut them. If you notice there are some numbers, the higher the number, the further down I want these pieces into the wood. So, the spine. I've identified the grain direction, running in this direction, up and down the wood, all the way across, which means that cutting like this is relatively simple. I'm going to play with a little bit of artistic license here and have it sitting proud. It's actually easier for a beginner to do one sitting proud than it is to do one indented.
With wood carving, there's always a lot of waste wood that has to be removed before you can get down to the nitty-gritty of actually forming and shaping. But the important thing is that there is a connection between the carver and the piece. When I was very young, I was always making things, enjoyed being practical. Perhaps that's why I'm enjoying going back to the Scouts, because I don't believe, having seen my own children grow up, that people these days have the access to the tools, the old skills that I was lucky enough to be able to do.
Yeah, it's left and right handed. It works for the left and right hand.
Wood carving is changing for me. Initially it was quite a solitude activity, being done on my own, trying to express how I was feeling through a piece of wood. But I've now got to a point where I've got an opportunity to pass what I've learned onto others. I don't expect to win all the hearts. But I've got grandchildren. They're still a little young, but I've hope for them yet. Maybe soon they will start to woodcarve with Grandad. Saw that question. It brought a smile to my face.